Ciao a tutti. Ti volevo farti sentire questa notizia del sindaco di Germania, quello che hanno uscito questo video dal giorno 27 febbraio nel 2022. Ci hanno detto che il 24 settembre nel 2022 ci saranno notizie di ricordare, una cosa, non lo so. Comunque ho guardato tutti i video su YouTube che ci hanno inviato quello della catastrofe, questa cosa qui. Questo forse sono fake news, non era vero forse, ma comunque non succederà. Hanno pubblicato per fatti suoi questo video sul 24 settembre. Non lo so che succederà il 24 settembre. Ora prenderò questo video e vediamo quello che ha da dire. Però questo non era in italiano, era la lingua in Germania o inglese. Prenderò sottotitoli, quello del sindaco. Mi pare che si chiama... non lo so, aspetta che controllo. Friedrich Merz. No, Friedrich Merz. Allora, perfino che hanno guardato pure i Simpson. Eh, eh. Allora, guardiamo questa notizia e vediamo. Prenderò sottotitoli in italiano. Comunque prenderò questa pagina, no, vuol dire questo video, quello che hanno visto perfino su tutti i canali YouTube, quello del sindaco. Allora, prenderò... vediamo... Italiano, allora... Comunque guardi questo video, che ci ho messo perfino sottotitoli in italiano. Guardi il video comunque.
Vielen Dank. Herr Bundeskanzler, Sie müssten Ihre Maske wieder aufsetzen.
Very much, Chancellor. You need to put on your mask again, please.
Vielen Dank. Ich eröffne die Aussprache.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to open the discussion, and I'd like to give the floor Friedrich Merz from the CDU-CSU group in Parliament.
And so after the special address by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, we're now going to hear from the German opposition leader, CDU party, Friedrich Merz.
President of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues,
this
24th of September 2022 is going to be,
Aspetta,
ladies and gentlemen, colleagues,
fidanzati. Questi sono fidanzati. Non lo so, comunque era meglio sentire queste lingue in italiano, però è un vero peccato. Comunque guarderò i sottotitoli, anche se c'è errori, niente ci fa. Comunque vediamo se la capisce quello che si spuntano i sottotitoli. Ok, guardiamo.
this 24th of September 2022 is going to be a day which we will remember, and we're going to say about this day in the future that I will remember where I was. When I got the news of the war in Ukraine, I know where I were when I saw the pictures of the war in Ukraine, and our first thoughts in this minute went to the entire people of Ukraine, and this is still the case today. We mourn with the families, we mourn the victims We have so many victims amongst the civilian population as well, and we admire the courage and the determination of these people to fight for their freedom. And at the same time, we feel ashamed and depressed that we weren't able to help the Ukrainians earlier. Our largest admiration and respect goes to the freely elected President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's a courageous man coming from a Jewish family. To defame him as a drug addict and Nazi, as the Russian president did in the course of this week, shows an extent of infamity and disrespect for humans which we haven't witnessed in this century on the European continent. Chancellor Scholz, you said that with this war, an era is ending in Europe, an era and a time of which we hoped that it would bring peace, prosperity, liberty for the 21st century, for the entire 21st century, but we had to learn differently as of a couple of days ago, in a brutal manner, in a ruthless manner, an authoritarian regime started a war of aggression in the midst of Europe, because this war is happening, is being waged between the largest territorial countries in Europe. Russia is a European country, as is Ukraine. And the war takes place less than 2 flight hours away from where we are convening this Sunday morning. And Chancellor Scholz, on behalf of the CDU and CSU parties, I want to thank you for your policy brief that we have just listened to. You know that we make every effort to find a common path in these times of great challenges. And over the last couple of days, we fought for common answers with the parties of government, and we're reflecting them in a motion for a resolution that we're submitting together with the Greens and the SPD. And this is just the common denominator, the minimum common denominator that we can find today. Today and in the future, we have a very clear position on this war and on the single man who is responsible for this war. And his name is Vladimir Putin.
Aus diesem lupenreinen Demokraten, der nie war, ist nun endgültig...
This Democrat, who he never was, turned into a criminal of war, visible and for everybody to see.
Aber so ein Krieg
But such a war
befiehlt nicht einer allein.
is not something that only a single person orders. It does not happen without a political environment. The system around him is a web of intelligence officers and masters of the propaganda, like his foreign minister Lavrov. It is a web of ruthless oligarchs around him who took hold of the resources of this country, and it's a web of a repressive apparatus of a state which arbitrarily detains, poisons, puts in camps people, and doesn't shy away from sending hitmen to other cities in Europe to kill opponents of their regime. And at this juncture, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, there should be no misunderstanding. The responsibility lies only with those actors that I mentioned, but part of this web and network are representatives of interests the world over who present themselves as friends of Russia, or those who understand Putin, who don't let anything happen or make everything possible, and try to make everything possible to make deals with the system and to try to sell it to the public as being a charity work. To name them useful idiots is probably the most friendly description of these activities that we witnessed also here in Germany, ladies and gentlemen. Threatening Ukraine with an aggression and with a war of aggression is not the only threat that we are seeing. In parallel to the tanks, we see waves of propaganda rolling through Europe, which in times of digitization and social networks are very efficient and therefore can cause a lot of damage, a damage that also undermines and threatens our social stability from the inside. And part of that propaganda is the claim that NATO would be the aggressor against the peace-loving Russia. This great country now needs to defend themselves against the military threat, according to the state apparatus, but you know it better. You were never threatened by NATO, Mr. Putin, and you know that. You're fully aware of this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you see who's applauding and who's not applauding, right now, I already know what kind of speeches we will have to wait for in the course of today from the far left and far right sides of this hall. But, ladies and gentlemen, the only threat that there was and is for Putin and his network, and this is something that he justifiably takes very seriously, is the threat to his power by his own people. The threat coming from democracy and freedom in the neighboring countries to Russia. This is what threatens the system. And this is why Putin suppresses and represses any kind of opposition in his own country. And this is why he works along with Alexander Lukashenko, who at this very day, while we're convening today, is holding a referendum in Belarus in order to change the constitution and from tomorrow on so that nuclear weapons can be deployed in Belarus. This is the new reality that we have woken up to in the course of this week. The state community of Western nations, the Europeans, Americans, and many other countries the world over respond to this break of international law and of all treaties that we have signed with Russia. And they respond to this consistently with hard activities. Russia is going to be isolated. The country and its representatives will be isolated. And this includes SWIFT, the international payment system, with which Russia is being excluded now from the international payment system. Chancellor Scholz, thank you very much for having said that in the course of today, that you held intensive negotiations and talks about this topic, including the question how arms shipments from various European countries have to be dealt with from now on. It's very clear and important to get that clear signal. Enough is enough. Game over. But at the same time, I want to be very clear. What we need today is not good speeches. Today, what's needed, and good, yes, good policy briefings of Parliament, yes, that's what we witnessed, but what we also need is consistency and stamina in the days and weeks to come. And this stamina and perseverance is something that will be tested probably in a couple of days' time. And these sanctions are going to unfold its impact not only in Russia, but also here in our country. The war in Ukraine is going to have consequences, not only when it comes to defense policy, but in many other areas of public life too. And therefore, Chancellor, we offer to you and your government comprehensive, concrete support and help. If you need support for the sanctions, comprehensive sanctions, you will have our support. And we're not going to criticize minutiae and details. If you want to get an upgrading, a comprehensive upgrading of our armed forces, which is what we want together with you, we're going to embark upon this path against resistances together with you. If you deem it necessary to change the energy policy of your government, if you, like we, believe that we cannot dispense with any other options of energy generation, you will find our active support for this view. And if you want to achieve what you propose today, then we can talk about this. Special funds of the federal government is not funds in the proper sense of the word, but it's new debt. And how we take up and incur this new debt and how we anchor it in our constitution is something that cannot be done by a policy briefing held on a Sunday morning alone. We need to talk about that calmly and need to cover the necessary details for that. And I want to be very clear. We're going to do that together. Not as a division of labor where we stick out our necks for the unpleasant things and you will then continue distributing all the goodies to the detriment of the younger generation. This is something that we're not going to go along with. But, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, all these are very clear decisions that will have to be taken upon short-term notice, but the real challenge is elsewhere and goes much deeper. At latest with this week, we're seeing the ruins of a German and European foreign and defense policies of the last decades, and some of the certainties, the seeming certainties of the last years have to be relegated to the past, finally. We're not surrounded only by friends. We're also being threatened in our directly neighborhood by an aggressive state. Unilateral reduction of arms doesn't lead to more, but rather to less security and safety. Is there anybody in this parliament who might have forgotten that in 1994, Ukraine ceded all its nuclear weapons, and in consideration to that, they received comprehensive and permanent guarantees for its territorial integrity. Is there anybody who might have forgotten this historic fact? And let me say it in this way: peace prayers, Eastern marches, and candle lines are a nice thing. And we too Earlier this morning, we too, together with a group of members of parliament, prayed for the end of this war and for peace in the world this morning. But with morals alone, the world around us is not going to become peaceful. Not to speak of the better moral that is being purported in Germany time and time again. Good words didn't help Ukraine, also not a delayed membership in NATO was of no benefit to them. Germany needs to be finally ready to define its interests in this world. Germany needs to be, above all, prepared to assert these interests. This includes not only, but also the capability to defend the own territory and population in an effective manner against any kind of intimidation and violence. And the armed forces, the German armed forces, if we ask them today, they're not able to do that. Well, I'm not going to respond to this corner, but I'm going to respond to that corner. If you want to make that a topic of our party policy discussion, ladies and gentlemen, I've been a member of parliament early on, and in this parliament, we all are responsible for the federal armed forces being in the condition that we find it in today. We made efforts to improve its conditions, and many initiatives fail because of you. And if we are moving forward today, we're going to move forward together. But only if we move forward, and not if you just take a look back and look into history and get entailed in party policy discussions. All these are assumptions and political views that you may or may not share. But the task of leadership, the real task of leadership, will have to be tackled by you, Chancellor Scholz, anyhow. And therefore, let me quote from a major German daily, which describes the situation pretty precisely. At the end of a sobering analysis, the author writes the following: the real bill is going to be footed by Germany. We see a density of crisis which meets an unprepared population, a population which doesn't have the tools at hand to deal with intimidation and military threats that the political system is exposed to. Uncertainty is generated by an aggressor, normally, but it becomes dangerous through weakness. End of quote. The necessary tools, Chancellor, this weakness, to do away with this weakness in our country and to provide the necessary tools is something that we understand to be the historic task of your chancellorship as of this week. Thank you very much for listening.
And that was Friedrich Merz, opposition leader from the CDU party, speaking there in the German Bundestag following the special address to the Bundestag by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
Allora, comunque questo video è tutto quello del sindaco. Comunque che hanno guardato questo video con le lingue inglesi, quello di 24 settembre, non mi ricordo, vuol dire la parola inglese settembre. Ok. Comunque, ciao e ci vediamo al prossimo video. Comunque questo che ho voluto lasciare questo video, e spero che che lo apprezzi di guardare quello di sottotitoli in italiano. Intanto no, è così, ho messo così i sottotitoli in italiano. Vabbè, comunque, ciao, ciao a tutti, e comunque ciao e bye. E vediamo che succederà il 24 settembre, ma speriamo che avrà tutto bene. Beh, ciao a tutti, ciao e grazie.